Well, that, of course, is the latest round of American sanctions we were discussing, but there's another set already in place, all coming from one law known as the Magnitsky Act. It's named for Sergei Magnitsky. He was a Russian lawyer who, after working to uncover a more than $200 million tax fraud scheme, he was sent to jail where he died in what can only be described as, well, suspicious circumstances. Now, he was hired to look into all of that by this man, Bill Browder. Now, he worked in Russia for years, making vast sums of money until things went bad. Well, now take a listen to some of what he told U.S. lawmakers on Thursday.
Vladimir Putin, I believe, to be the richest man in the world. I believe he's worth $200 billion. That money is held all over the world in banks in America and all over. The purpose of Putin's regime has been to commit terrible crimes in order to get that money. He said it's very straightforward, 50%. Not 50% for the Russian government or 50% for the presidential administration of Russia, 50% for Vladimir Putin. Yes, the Russian government has made a number of threats against my life, tried and failed 3 times to have me put on the Interpol most wanted list so I could be arrested as traveling. They've tried to extradite me from the UK. There's probably 250 people working inside of the Russian security services and law enforcement agencies on the Bill Browder story, trying to destroy me in whatever way they can.
Bill Browder there. Well, bold claims from the Senate floor to walking through Connect the World's door. Bill Browder, chief executive of Hermitage Capital Management, and as you just heard, a vocal critic of the Russian president, joins us now from London. Good to have you with us, Bill.
Good to be here.
Now, you've been blacklisted by the Russian government. Why do they consider you a threat to national security?
Well, when I was an investor in Russia, I ran the largest investment fund in the country. We discovered billions of dollars going missing from the companies that we invested in, companies like Gazprom and the National Electricity Company. And so I went about a campaign to research how the stealing took place and then publicize the research through the international media. And for a while, this strategy worked of diminishing the amount of corruption. But as you can imagine, the people who were making the billions and then not making it anymore because of my exposés were quite mad. And those people were effectively partners of Vladimir Putin. And so in November 2005, I was flying back to Russia. I was stopped at the border. I was then detained for 15 hours and then deported from Russia and declared a threat to national security.
And now we just heard you speaking to lawmakers here in the U.S. last week about potential meddling in the U.S. election. Slowly but surely, more and more detail is surfacing about a meeting between Trump campaign staff, including the president's son, his son-in-law, and Russian operatives. Why would Russians want that meeting?
Well, so just to finish up with my story, after I was kicked out, my offices were raided. I hired a young lawyer named Sergei Magnitsky. He looked at the purpose of the raid and discovered it was to steal $230 million of taxes that we paid. He exposed that. He testified against the officials. He was subsequently arrested, tortured, and killed at the age of 37, 7.5 years ago. And that led to the passage in the United States of something called the Magnitsky Act, which freezes the assets and bans the visas of people who killed Sergei and people who do similar types of things. Vladimir Putin was absolutely furious about the Magnitsky Act because it affects him personally, and he's been on a campaign ever since then to have the Magnitsky Act repealed. And that lawyer, Natalia Veselnitskaya, and Rinat Akhmetshin, the lobbyist, went to Trump Tower on the 9th of June 2016 last year, and they went with one specific request, which was to repeal the Magnitsky Act if Donald Jr.'s father became president.
And what do you think, what do you know about that meeting? Is it just what you've heard? Why do you think the Russians would be meeting them? Was it purely about those sanctions, about the Magnitsky Act?
It was purely about the Magnitsky Act. How do we know that? We know that because it wasn't the only meeting that they were doing. This same group of individuals had a full-scale operation going on Capitol Hill to try to achieve the same objectives. And so we watched them in action, and that's all they were doing. They were doing this for quite a length of time, and they were not shy about it. If you were the one thing I believe from their own description of that meeting, which they said themselves, was it was about the repeal of the Magnitsky Act. There's no mystery in this particular question.
You made a lot of claims this week, including that 250 intelligence agents had tried to kill you. What sort of evidence do you have to support those claims?
Documentary evidence. So the Russians, it's like the Russians are kind of like the Gestapo in Germany. Everything is documented, and we have pieces of paper with people's names all over them. And I shouldn't say there's 250 people trying to kill me. There are 250 people in one way or another trying to destroy me. And what that means is trying to arrest me, trying to seize my assets, making movies about me. And there are some people in that group trying to kill me.
You also claimed that President Putin is the wealthiest person in the world, worth more than $200 billion. That's double the wealth of the Amazon founder Jeff Bezos and double the Microsoft founder Bill Gates's value. Where do you have evidence to support that claim?
Well, what we know is that when Putin arrested the richest oligarch in Russia, Michael Khodorkovsky, in 2004, he put him on trial and allowed the television cameras to film the richest man sitting in a cage. And then the rest of the oligarchs went to him and said, what do we have to do to make sure we don't sit in a cage? And he said something to the effect of 50%. Now, Vladimir Putin doesn't keep any of this money in his own name. It's held in the name of oligarch trustees. But as time has gone on, we now have evidence of oligarch trustees holding money for Vladimir Putin. There's a $1 billion house on the Black Sea that's been attributed to Vladimir Putin by one of the people managing the finances of that house. The United States Treasury disclosed 3 names of 3 oligarchs who are trustees for Putin. And even in the Magnitsky case, we've found money from the crime that Sergei Magnitsky discovered, the $230 million theft, going to one of the nominees of Vladimir Putin. And so as time goes on, the picture gets built up. But
that still doesn't add up. You're talking about $200 billion.
So
where
the
is
way
that
I
money?
get to
If President Putin has $200 billion, where is it tied up?
It's tied up in the hands of Russian oligarchs. So the Russian oligarchs, when you see their wealth on the Forbes list, that wealth is not all their money. Half the money belongs to Vladimir Putin. And that money is being held by oligarchs in American banks, in hedge funds, in private equity funds, in trophy properties all over the world. And that's how he holds his wealth.
All right, we look forward to seeing more evidence of that. Bill Browder, good to have you with us. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Well, you're watching Connect the World. Still to come, a diplomatic crisis is brewing between Berlin and Ankara. Why Turkey says it has arrested German citizens. Next.